bunch of weeds on there. I think it's a great begging too. It's hard to feel the bite. I think this might be a decent fish here. Yeah. Yes, sir. There we go. Nice one on a Carolina rig. Slide him in here. It's a good fish. I'm on that little red line 2-aught round bend. 3.5, pretty one. All right, I'm gonna rig up a basic Carolina rig. Awesome, really kind of underrated deep water fishing rig. We're fishing fairly deep here. Sometimes I'll go lighter, but we're out in about 20. So I'm gonna go with about 3/4 ounces of tungsten, but I do 2 3/8 ounce sinkers back to back. I think they clank a little, make some noise on the bottom. Then one thing real important, especially if you're using tungsten instead of lead, I'm not even sure who makes them, but there's these rubber BBs, or rubber balls. I like putting that on there, especially when you're throwing heavy tungsten, because that's a lot of weight every time you cast, slamming down on your knot. So I got a little rubber ball in there that kind of protects the knot from that tungsten crashing into it. I've already tied my leader line onto my swivel. That way I can tie just a basic polymer knot here. You gotta do it in that order or else it ain't gonna work. That's a VMC No. 6 swivel. Usually I tie pretty fancy knots, but I'm pretty much polymers for the Carolina rig. Never really gonna put a ton of pressure on it. It's not like a flipping bait where I'm gonna set the hook real hard close to the boat. All these hook sets are gonna be at least a good half cast length away from the boat. So there we got our 2 back-to-back 3/8 equal 3/4 rubber bead swivel, and then leader length. Basically, I don't really ever like going real long on a leader. I tend to fish them on the shorter side just because they cast a lot better. If you get into them long leaders, the bait has a tendency to tumble when you cast it, and if you pay attention, sometimes you'll break a fish off on a Carolina rig and not know why. But when you made a cast with a real long leader, it'll tie an overhand knot in your line. Usually it happens up here. If you ever break one off on a Carolina rig and you got a knot in your line right there, or that's all you come back with is a little bit of leader, it's because you had a knot in your line from casting. So I tend to keep mine a little shorter. I think they cast a lot better. So we're just gonna, we're gonna go a little couple feet maybe. And usually the shallower I fish, the shorter I go with the leader. Or if I'm in current, I'll go short leader. And then tie it onto that's a 2/aught VMC red line round bend hook. I think that's the best style Carolina rig hook there is. Just kind of, all your hook sets are gonna be kind of real long angle. It's not really rare to have a vertical hook set on a Carolina rig. I just think the way that hook's shaped and the style baits I'm using, it's the right fit. More to do with the angle of the hook set, I think, than anything. You know, you're basically got a 45 down to your bait, long line. It's a fairly thin hook, so it penetrates real easy. Then you got the needle point on there, and the coating just makes everything go in there easy. You really don't have to hit them super hard. I'm still gonna anyways, but you can get by with a lot less. I'm just throwing the old yoga pants 4-inch turd on there and tuck her in. There's the rig. I think we're about, I don't know, 2.5 feet maybe, a little over 2 feet. And that's it. Rod and reel, I like a long rod. I'll throw something in the 7-6 to 8 foot range. Just allows me to make a long cast, and then, you know, if one does bite out there, this is one of the few techniques I'm throwing straight fluoro for. I can get a good hook set with a long rod, get a big sweep, and get that hook home. And then as far as fishing it goes, it's about as simple as it gets. Make a long cast, let it fall straight to the bottom, then reel down and just drag, just little drags, you know. I'll reel down to my bait, you know, maybe pull it a foot or two at a time, give it, reel back down, pull it a little bit at a time, and that's it. But the beauty of a Carolina rig is it's one of the best rigs for feeling bottom. I got a lot of weight on there, I got tungsten on there. I can really tell exactly what my bait's on. Like, similar to a crankbait, you know, you can tell when you're hitting rock or whatever. Maybe even a little better because you don't have all that vibration in there. And you're really just inching that thing along the bottom. It's it's a fish catching bait. A lot of guys kind of frown upon it. I think I'm getting a bluegill bite there. Yeah. A lot of guys don't think much of a Carolina rig. They don't throw a big worm or football jig or whatever, but it catches a lot of fish. I wouldn't say maybe not the biggest ones out of the school, but it's definitely a good way to get bit. And I really like fishing on a place I'm unfamiliar with, you know. If we're hunting down, you know, we've side scanned. We know there's some rock here, but I really don't know exactly where the fish are positioned. So I can use this, make a long cast, cover a fair amount of water. And it's really telling me the whole way back what's going on. You know, if I'm hitting rock or muck or sand or gravel or whatever it is, even you can kind of tell how big the rock is too by how it feels. But I mean, I can make a real nice long cast. I can cover that whole strip all the way back, and it's really telling me the whole way what I'm hitting. And I'm kind of feeling for the chunkier stuff. That's where I'm thinking the fish are most likely going to be set up on. You can see on the 360, it's a strip of definite harder bottom, but most of it's sand, gravel, and then not really in the middle of it, but down it there is a strip of thicker rock. And with this Carolina rig, I can tell immediately when I'm on it. And especially if you're fishing a little like smaller places where it might just be a little rock. The nice thing about Carolina rig with having the bait behind the weight, like if I come through it and I feel my sinker pop through it, and if I stop right there, I know my bait's sitting right where it needs to be, versus any other bait you throw, once you pop through it, once you know you were in it, it's, you know, it's too late, your bait's already past it. So that's another cool thing about a Carolina rig. But it's pretty basic fishing. I mean, I think it just gets kind of overlooked now with all the other styles of ways of catching them out deep. I think it's kind of an old school bait, but it definitely still has a place in the tackle box for sure. And there's sometimes they get on it really good. There's sometimes it'll outfish anything else down there. It's a sleeper smallmouth rig too. Not a lot of guys Carolina rig for smallmouth. That's a different story, but definitely got a time and place there. They really like a Carolina rig. I think it's just a curiosity, all the silt coming off the sinker. There we go. That's a good fish. Yes, sir. Get up here. Yeah. That's a nice one. That's another nice thing about the Carolina rig. Landing percentage is really, really good. I mean, as far as talking about hooking them, it's just, you just got a worm and a hook. That little 2/0's just welded in the top of his head. And I got heavy line and a big rod, so, you know, with the exception of like 6-pounders, you can pretty much wind them into the boat flip them. You don't got to worry about light line, spinning rod, stuff like that. Cover a ton of water, throw it anywhere in open water, catches them really good, and the landing percentage is about second to none. But beautiful bass, nice chunky one on the Carolina rig, old school. This is a 7.6 heavy, something in that 7.5 to 8 foot range I like for Carolina rig fishing. And then it's a straight 20-pound fluoro. I do like an 8-to-1 reel. Anytime I'm fishing deep, I just like picking up line quicker. Usually I'm using the same line for leader line as well, so it's straight 20 all the way through. Sometimes I will go down and fish a lighter leader, but I don't know. The more I Carolina rig fish, I don't think your line much matters, you know. You're dragging a big weight on the bottom, making a bunch of, that sinker's really kind of creating a little silt trail when you're dragging along and bouncing along, and then your bait's kind of just hovering in it behind it. So I don't think light line's really a big deal on a Carolina rig, especially with a big weight. If you're gonna fish a finessey one, you know, more like a Mojo rig, I could see your line mattering, but on this deal, straight 20 all the way through, 8-to-1 reel, and then a long, heavy action rod. I mean, you can get by with a 7-footer, but the 7.6 makes a big difference, and I could see a use for 8-foot rod in this scenario, but 7.6 is plenty for me. I'm not a big long rod guy, so this is probably the exception of this, a chicken and punching. This is the only time I really ever use a rod over 7.3. Baby chicken eater. As far as setting the hook when you get a Carolina rig, I like to keep everything real low and horizontal. I'm never really ever gonna set the hook straight up and down on a Carolina rig. I'm always working my bait kind of low, slow drags or whatever. If I detect a strike and one hits it, or I know one's on there, I'll simply reel down to the fish and then just a long, low sweep and just try to move as much line as possible. Because the one problem with the Carolina rig, and especially if you're fishing a longer leader, that fish might not quite be, it's pretty rare for him to go straight away from you, you know what I mean? So you kind of you're fighting that corner of where your sinker's on the bottom and the fish is moving. So I think it's really necessary to long, hard hook set, sweep as much line as you can and get everything in line. And then also when you're reeling down on it, getting as much slack out of it as you can before you hit them. Just because, especially if you're throwing like a 3-4 foot long leader, a lot of times there's quite a big angle in where you're feeling with your bait to where the worm actually is with the fish. So that's another reason for the long rod. I don't think he's big. A little guy on the Carolina rig, but awesome way to hunt around on the bottom. You can tell immediately when you're on the rocks. Not a big one at all, but threw up there, drag it a little bit, knew I was on the rocks. Boom, bite. I can see him on the 360 too, but it's nice reassuring when you feel that sinker hitting on the bottom. See if we can get another one in there. Be nice to run into a wad. We've been grinding a lot this year.